In the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. Nestled between rolling hills and surrounded by dense woods, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. Families gathered for picnics. In the park on weekends, children played freely in their front yards and neighbors exchanged warm smiles as they passed one another on the street. For 8-year-old Marcus Johnson, this peaceful little town was his entire world, a place filled with laughter, adventure, and endless possibilities. Marcus had always been an energetic child, full of curiosity about everything around him. He loved climbing trees, chasing butterflies, and exploring every nook and cranny of his neighborhood. His favorite spot was the big oak tree in his backyard, its thick branches perfect for swinging from or sitting on while dreaming up stories. On sunny afternoons like today, you could almost always find him outside, running barefoot through the grass or tossing a ball against the side of the house. To Marcus, there was nothing more exciting than discovering something new right outside his doorstep. That particular afternoon, however, would become unforgettable, not for joy, but for tragedy. It started out like any other summer day. The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden rays over the sleepy streets of Willow Creek. Birds chirped cheerfully and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the trees. Inside the Johnson home, Lisa, Marcus's mother, bustled about the kitchen preparing dinner. She hummed softly to herself as she chopped vegetables, occasionally glancing out the window to check on her son playing in the yard below. Everything seemed so normal, so ordinary. Outside, Marcus was busy building a fort using sticks and rocks he'd collected earlier that week. He imagined himself as a brave explorer defending his territory from imaginary invaders. Every now and then, he stopped to chase after a fluttering butterfly or inspect a shiny pebble he found buried in the dirt. At one point, he even called out to his mom, asking if she wanted to come see the treasure he'd uncovered. Laughing, Lisa told him she'd join him once she finished cooking. Little did either of them know those would be the last words they exchanged before everything changed forever. As the clock ticked closer to 4:30 p.m., the atmosphere began to shift subtly. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of rain from far-off clouds gathering on the horizon. Still engrossed in his game, Marcus didn't notice how the light grew dimmer or how the sounds of birdsong faded into silence. Meanwhile, inside the house, Lisa set down her knife and wiped her hands on a dish towel. Dinner preparations were nearly complete, and she decided it was time to take a break. Grabbing a glass of lemonade, she stepped onto the back porch to call Marcus in for a snack. "Marcus," she shouted, cupping her hands around her mouth. "Come here, I've got something cold for you." But when no reply came, Lisa frowned. Normally, Marcus would drop whatever he was doing and race toward her voice, eager for a treat. Puzzled, she scanned the yard again, expecting to see him crouched behind a bush or perched atop the oak tree, giggling mischievously. Instead, all she saw was the half-finished fort and scattered toys lying abandoned on the ground. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach as she called out louder this time, her voice tinged with worry. "Marcus? Sweetheart, where are you?" Still no answer. Heart pounding, Lisa hurried down the steps and into the yard, searching frantically for any sign of her son. She checked behind the shed, under the picnic table, and even peeked inside the garage. Nothing. Panic rising, she ran to the front yard, thinking maybe he'd wandered off to play with the neighbor kids. But when she asked Mrs. Peterson next door if she'd seen him, the elderly woman shook her head, concern etched on her face. By now, Lisa's fear had escalated into full-blown terror. She rushed back inside and dialed 911, her hands trembling, so badly she could barely press the numbers. Within minutes, police officers arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows across the otherwise serene neighborhood. Word spread quickly among the residents, and soon dozens of people joined the search party, combing every inch of Willow Creek for the missing boy. Hours turned into days, yet no trace of Marcus was found. Flyers bearing his smiling face and description were plastered on lampposts and bulletin boards throughout the town. Local news stations covered the story extensively, urging anyone with information to come forward. Volunteers organized grid searches, scouring nearby parks, forests, and abandoned buildings. Despite these efforts, Marcus remained elusive, leaving his family and community desperate for answers. For Lisa, the days following her son's disappearance felt like living in a nightmare. Sleep eluded her. Food tasted like ash. Each morning, she woke hoping it had all been some cruel dream, only to be met with the harsh reality that her child was still gone. Friends and family tried to offer comfort, but nothing could ease the gaping hole left in her heart. Her husband, James, wasn't faring much better. A reserved man by nature, he channeled his grief into action, spending hours poring over maps and retracing routes Marcus might have taken. Yet despite his tireless determination, the mystery remained unsolved. Meanwhile, the rest of Willow Creek struggled to make sense of what had happened. Parents grew wary, keeping a closer eye on their own children. Conversations at the grocery, store or coffee shop inevitably turned to Marcus, with theories ranging from runaway scenarios to abduction by strangers. Some clung to hope that he'd simply gotten lost and would eventually be found safe. Others feared the worst, haunted by the thought of harm coming to such a bright, innocent soul. 2 years stretched on, marking the passage of seasons without bringing resolution. The initial fervor of the search waned, replaced by a somber acceptance that Marcus might never return. But for James Johnson, giving up was not an option. Every night, after finishing work at the auto repair shop, he retreated to his garage, staring at old photographs of Marcus and replaying memories in his mind. He became obsessed with uncovering the truth, driven by a father's unyielding love and refusal to let his son fade into obscurity. It was during one of these late-night sessions that James first noticed something strange. As he sat hunched over a map of the neighborhood, a faint noise drifted through the open garage door. At first he dismissed it as the wind rattling loose shingles or distant traffic. But as the sound persisted, a rhythmic scratching, almost mechanical, he realized it was coming from beyond the fence separating their property from the Harpers' yard next door. The Harpers, an elderly couple who lived quietly and kept mostly to themselves, weren't exactly mysterious, but James had always felt uneasy around them. Their dog Max, a large German shepherd, barked incessantly whenever anyone approached their property. And though they waved politely during chance encounters, there was something guarded about their demeanor that made James instinctively cautious. Now, as he listened intently to the noise emanating from their side of the fence, his unease deepened. Curiosity, overriding caution, James grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The air was cool and damp, hinting at an impending storm. Shining the beam along the fence line, he spotted fresh dirt piled near the base of the Harpers' dog kennel. It looked recently disturbed, as though someone, or something, had been digging there. His pulse quickened as he studied the scene, trying to piece together what it might mean. Was this just Max burying bones, as dogs often do? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? Unable to shake the feeling that he was onto something important, James resolved to investigate further. But before acting impulsively, he decided to observe the Harpers more closely. Over the next few days, he paid attention to their routines, noting subtle changes in behavior. For instance, Max, usually vocal and alert, had grown eerily silent. Even during thunderstorms, which typically sent him into a barking frenzy, the dog remained eerily calm. Then there were the nighttime trips James caught glimpses of, the Harpers sneaking out to the kennel armed with shovels and flashlights, their movements furtive and hurried. Each new detail gnawed at James, fueling his suspicion that something dark lay hidden within the confines of the Harpers' property. Though logic told him to tread carefully, his instincts screamed for answers. After all, 2 years of unanswered questions had taught him one thing. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to confront it. And James Johnson was determined to be that person. James Johnson's suspicions about the Harpers grew stronger with each passing day. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford, his mind consumed by thoughts of Marcus and the strange activities unfolding next door. Every creak of the fence, every hushed conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Harper, every inexplicable trip to the dog kennel, it all seemed connected somehow. But proving it was another matter entirely. The first step James took was gathering evidence, however small or circumstantial. He started documenting everything, jotting down notes in a worn-out notebook, snapping photos discreetly from his bedroom window, even recording audio clips of the late-night noises coming from the Harpers' yard. At first, these efforts felt futile, like chasing shadows in the dark. Yet, as the pieces slowly began to accumulate, patterns emerged that were hard to ignore. The freshly disturbed dirt near the kennel, for instance, wasn't just a one-time occurrence. James noticed new patches appearing almost weekly. And Max, their once boisterous German shepherd, now rarely made a sound, spending most of his time lying listlessly inside the kennel, as if guarding something or someone. One evening, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, James decided to confront the Harpers directly. It wasn't an easy decision. He knew how fragile relationships could be in a tight-knit community like Willow Creek, where everyone valued privacy and trust. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they held answers to questions he'd been asking himself for 2 agonizing years. Taking a deep breath, he walked across the narrow strip of grass separating their properties and knocked firmly on the Harpers' front door. Mrs. Harper answered after what felt like an eternity. Her frail frame leaned heavily against the doorframe, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the shawl draped over her shoulders. She looked surprised to see James standing there, his face etched with determination. "Can I help you?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evening, Mrs. Harper," James said, forcing a polite smile despite the storm brewing inside him. "I wanted to ask about the noise coming from your kennel lately. Sounds like digging or scratching. Have you noticed anything unusual?" For a moment, Mrs. Harper froze, her lips parted as though searching for words. Then, composing herself, she nodded slowly. "Oh, yes," she replied, her tone measured but tinged with unease. "Max has been digging up old bones recently. You know how dogs are. They can't resist a good sniff around." James studied her closely, trying to gauge whether she was telling the truth. There was something off about her explanation, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Old bones?" he echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's odd. I don't recall seeing any animal remains buried there before." "Well, maybe they've been there all along," Mrs. Harper countered quickly, her voice rising slightly. "We haven't used that part of the yard much since Max got older. He doesn't move around as much anymore." Her excuse sounded rehearsed, almost robotic, and James felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could press further, Mr. Harper appeared behind his wife, his towering figure casting a long shadow over the threshold. His expression was stern, almost hostile, as he glared at James. "Is there something else we can help you with?" he demanded gruffly, effectively cutting off any chance for further questioning. Realizing he wouldn't get much more out of them, James reluctantly thanked the couple and returned home. But his encounter only deepened his resolve. If anything, their evasive behavior confirmed his suspicions that the Harpers were hiding something significant. Over the next few days, James doubled down on his investigation, determined to uncover whatever secrets lay buried beneath the surface. He began by researching the Harpers themselves. They had lived in Willow Creek for decades, keeping largely to themselves. Neighbors described them as quiet and reserved, often seen tending to their garden or taking leisurely walks with Max. On paper, they seemed harmless enough. However, a closer look revealed cracks in their otherwise unremarkable facade. For starters, they rarely interacted with children, including Marcus, despite living right next door. And while most residents participated in community events or volunteered at local charities, the Harpers never joined in, preferring instead to remain isolated. Determined to dig deeper, James turned his attention to the dog kennel itself. During daylight hours, when the Harpers were occupied elsewhere, he observed it from various angles, looking for signs of tampering or concealment. One afternoon, armed with binoculars, he climbed onto his roof for a better vantage point. From there, he spotted something peculiar: faint scuff marks on the wooden planks lining the base of the kennel, as if heavy objects had been dragged across them repeatedly. Even more alarming was the realization that the structure appeared larger than necessary for housing a single dog. Its walls were unusually thick, and its foundation seemed reinforced with concrete, an odd choice for what should have been a simple outdoor shelter. These discoveries only fueled James's growing paranoia. Late one night, unable to sleep, he crept outside and positioned himself near the fence, listening intently for sounds from the Harpers' property. Sure enough, shortly after midnight, he heard muffled voices followed by the unmistakable scrape of metal against earth. Peering through the gaps in the fence, he saw Mr. Harper carrying a shovel, with Mrs. Harper trailing close behind holding a flashlight. Together they approached the kennel, disappearing from view as they entered through a side hatch James hadn't noticed before. His heart raced as he watched them work, their movements hurried yet deliberate. Though he couldn't see exactly what they were doing, the implications were clear. Whatever lay hidden beneath the kennel was important enough to warrant secrecy and possibly danger. As dawn broke, James retreated to his garage, his mind racing with possibilities. Could this finally be the breakthrough he'd been searching for? Or was he chasing ghosts, driven mad by grief and desperation? Over the following week, James meticulously compiled his findings into a dossier, complete with photographs, notes, and timestamps. He included details about the Harpers' suspicious behavior, the anomalies surrounding the kennel, and his own observations during those tense nighttime vigils. Armed with this evidence, he decided it was time to involve the authorities. While he understood the risks of making accusations without concrete proof, he also knew he couldn't carry this burden alone any longer. On a crisp Saturday morning, James visited the local police station and requested to speak with Detective Miller, the officer who had led the initial investigation into Marcus's disappearance. Miller listened intently as James laid out his case, occasionally nodding or scribbling notes in his notepad. When James finished, the detective sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples thoughtfully. "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Mr. Johnson," Miller said finally, his tone cautious but respectful. "But I need to remind you that these are just theories at this point. Without direct evidence linking the Harpers to Marcus's case, we can't act on speculation alone." "I understand," James replied earnestly. "But isn't it worth checking? After 2 years, don't we owe it to Marcus, and to ourselves, to leave no stone unturned?" Detective Miller hesitated, weighing the potential consequences of pursuing such a sensitive line of inquiry. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "All right, we'll pay the Harpers a visit and take a closer look at their property. But I want you to stay out of it from here on out, okay? Let us handle this professionally." Relieved yet anxious, James agreed and left the station, hoping against hope that his instincts were right. Little did he know, the journey toward uncovering the truth was far from over, and the answers awaiting him would change his life forever. As the police prepared to investigate, James returned home, his nerves frayed but his spirit unyielding. 2 years of unanswered questions had brought him to this pivotal moment, and he refused to let fear or doubt derail him now. Whatever lay beneath the Harpers' dog kennel, he was ready to face it head-on, for Marcus, for Lisa, and for the shattered pieces of his family that still clung to the faintest glimmer of hope. The morning after James met with Detective Miller, the air in Willow Creek carried a tension that hadn't been felt in years. It was as though the entire town sensed something significant was about to happen, even if no one could quite put their finger on it. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances over garden fences, and children played quieter than usual, perhaps picking up on the anxiety radiating from the adults around them. For James Johnson, however, there was no room for doubt or hesitation. He had spent 2 long years searching for answers, and now, finally, he felt like he was standing at the edge of discovery. Detective Miller arrived at the Harpers' residence shortly before noon, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. The sight of police cars pulling into the driveway sent ripples of curiosity through the neighborhood. People peeked out of windows or lingered on sidewalks, pretending to water plants or check mailboxes while secretly watching the scene unfold. Inside his own home, James stood by the window, gripping the curtains tightly as he observed the unfolding drama next door. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the same question. What will they find? Mrs. Harper answered the door. When the officers knocked, her face pale and drawn, she looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she had during James's earlier visit. Mr. Harper appeared behind her moments later, his expression unreadable but his posture stiff, almost defensive. Detective Miller introduced himself politely, explaining that they were conducting routine follow-ups related to Marcus's disappearance. "We've received some information suggesting we should take another look at your property," he said calmly, though his eyes scanned the couple carefully. "For any signs of unease?" "Of course," Mrs. Harper replied, her voice trembling slightly. "We have nothing to hide." As the group moved toward the backyard, James slipped outside and positioned himself near the fence, pretending to tidy up his garden while keeping a close eye on the proceedings. From this vantage point, he watched as the officers inspected the dog kennel, running their hands along its wooden panels and examining the freshly disturbed dirt nearby. Detective Miller asked questions, casual yet probing, about Max's behavior, the digging noises reported by neighbors, and why certain areas of the yard seemed so meticulously maintained despite the couple's apparent disinterest in gardening. "Mr. Harper responded curtly, his tone clipped. "Max is old now, he doesn't do much except sleep. As for the dirt, maybe he dug it up chasing rabbits or something. Animals are unpredictable." Detective Miller nodded thoughtfully but didn't seem entirely convinced. Turning his attention to the kennel itself, he pointed out the scuff marks James had noticed earlier. "These scratches look recent," he remarked. "Do you know what caused them?" Mrs. Harper hesitated, glancing nervously at her husband before replying. "Probably just wear and tear. That kennel has been here for years." Despite their explanations, the detective pressed on, requesting permission to search the interior of the structure. Initially reluctant, the Harpers eventually agreed, unlocking the side hatch and stepping aside as the officers entered. What happened next unfolded quickly, yet every detail burned itself into James's memory like a photograph etched in fire. Inside the kennel, the team discovered tools, shovels, picks, and flashlights, stacked neatly against one wall. More. Alarmingly, they found several large plastic bins filled with soil samples, some still damp as though recently used. Detective Miller ordered the officers to begin digging beneath the kennel's foundation, which required removing sections of the wooden floor. As shovels bit into the earth, James held his breath, his knuckles white from gripping the fence so tightly. Minutes stretched into hours, and the tension grew unbearable. Finally, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, one of the officers called out, "Sir, you need to see this." James strained to hear. What came next? His pulse pounding in his ears. When Detective Miller bent down to examine the ground closely, his expression shifted from professional detachment to shock. He motioned for the others to continue excavating, and soon, fragments of fabric emerged from the soil, bright colors muted by time and dirt. One piece caught James's eye immediately, a scrap of red material that matched the hoodie Marcus had worn the day he disappeared. Tears welled up in James's eyes as he realized the truth was finally coming to light. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, the Harpers crumbled. Mrs. Harper collapsed onto the grass, sobbing uncontrollably, while Mr. Harper stared blankly ahead, his face drained of all color. Under intense questioning, they confessed everything, their voices shaking as they recounted the events of that fateful afternoon 2 years ago. According to their account, Marcus had wandered too close to their property while playing, accidentally, startling Max, who barked loudly. Fearing the noise would draw unwanted attention from nosy neighbors, the Harpers panicked and lured Marcus inside under false pretenses. They claimed they only intended to keep him quiet until things settled down, but once he was in their basement, a hidden space beneath the kennel, they realized letting him go would expose their negligence. Overwhelmed by guilt and paranoia, they locked him away, hoping to figure out a solution later. Tragically, their indecision proved fatal. Marcus succumbed to dehydration within days due to lack of access to water. Devastated by what they had done, the Harpers buried his body beneath the kennel rather than face justice. They convinced themselves that burying the truth alongside Marcus would protect them from scrutiny. But secrets, no matter how deeply buried, always find a way to surface. For James, hearing the confession felt like being struck by lightning. The weight of the past 2 years crashed down on him all at once. The sleepless nights, the endless searches, the hope that had flickered stubbornly despite the odds. Now, standing mere feet away from the place where his son's remains lay, hidden, he felt both relief and devastation. Relief because he finally knew the truth, and devastation because the truth was far worse than anything he could have imagined. Lisa reacted differently when James broke the news to her. At first, she refused to believe it, clinging to the faint hope that Marcus might still be alive somewhere. But as reality sank in, she retreated into herself, unable to process the magnitude of the loss. Friends and family rallied around them, offering support in whatever ways they could. Yet nothing could fill the void left by Marcus's absence. In the weeks that followed, the community of Willow Creek came together to honor Marcus's memory. Vigils were held, candles lit, and stories shared about the bright, adventurous boy who had brought joy to everyone who knew him. A memorial fund was established in his name to promote child safety awareness, ensuring that no other family would endure the pain the Johnsons had suffered. For James, the road to healing was long and fraught with challenges. Some days the grief threatened to consume him entirely. Other days he found solace in small victories, like planting a tree in Marcus's favorite spot in the backyard, or volunteering at local schools to teach kids about stranger danger. Though life would never return to the way it once was, James vowed to channel his sorrow into action, using his experience to help others avoid similar tragedies. Meanwhile, the Harpers faced legal consequences for their actions. Charged with kidnapping and manslaughter, they awaited trial in county jail, their reputations irreparably tarnished. Many in Willow Creek struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet elderly couple with the monstrous acts they had committed. Conversations around dinner tables and coffee shops often turned to questions of morality and justice. How could someone capable of such cruelty live unnoticed among them for so long? As the seasons changed and winter gave way to spring, Willow Creek slowly began to heal. Flowers bloomed, birds sang, and life moved forward, but not without scars. For James and Lisa, the journey was far from over. Every milestone they missed, with Marcus weighed heavily on their hearts, a constant reminder of the life stolen from them. Still, they clung to the belief that love endures beyond death, carrying Marcus's spirit with them wherever they went. And so, amidst the pain and heartache, there remained a glimmer of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Marcus's story, though tragic, served as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, community, and unwavering determination in the pursuit of truth. In uncovering the secrets buried beneath the Harpers' dog kennel, James had not only found closure for himself and his family, but also ignited a movement toward greater safety and accountability in their town. The days following the discovery beneath the Harpers' dog kennel were a blur of emotions for James Johnson. The weight of knowing what had happened to Marcus pressed down on him like a storm cloud that refused to break. While the truth brought a measure of closure, it also opened wounds he thought would never fully heal. Every corner of his home reminded him of Marcus, his laughter echoing in empty hallways, his toys scattered across the living room floor, and the faint scuff marks on the walls where he used to chase imaginary dragons. Each memory was both a blessing and a curse, keeping Marcus alive in spirit but painfully absent in reality. Lisa, too, struggled to cope with the revelation. At first, she clung to denial, refusing to accept that her son's body had been found buried so close to their own backyard. She spent hours staring at old photographs, tracing her fingers over Marcus's smiling face as if trying to summon him back into existence. When the reality became impossible to ignore, she withdrew into herself, speaking little and retreating to her bedroom for days at a time. Friends and family tried to comfort her, bringing meals and offering kind words, but nothing seemed to penetrate the thick fog of grief enveloping her. James, however, channeled his pain into action. He couldn't change the past, but he could honor Marcus's memory by ensuring no other child suffered the same fate. With Detective Miller's help, he organized community meetings to discuss ways to improve child safety in Willow Creek. These gatherings drew large crowds, as neighbors who had once taken their quiet town for granted now realized how vulnerable they truly were. Parents shared stories of near misses. Teachers talked about recognizing signs of neglect or abuse, and local law enforcement provided tips on safeguarding children against potential threats. One idea that gained traction was the establishment of a neighborhood watch program specifically focused on protecting kids. Volunteers patrolled streets during peak playtimes, keeping an eye out for suspicious activity. Others suggested installing cameras in public areas to deter wrongdoing and provide evidence in case something did occur. James even reached out to schools and community centers, advocating for mandatory safety workshops where children could learn how to identify dangerous situations and seek help when needed. Slowly but surely, Willow Creek began transforming into a safer place, not just for its youngest residents but for everyone. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against the Harpers dominated headlines not only in Willow Creek but across the region. Their trial became a media sensation, drawing reporters and curious onlookers from miles away. For many, it was incomprehensible how such seemingly ordinary people could commit such heinous acts. Testimonies revealed chilling details about their lives, years of isolation, untreated mental health issues, and a growing paranoia that ultimately led them to believe silencing Marcus was their only option. The court heard accounts of their initial panic upon realizing they'd made a grave mistake, and their subsequent attempts to cover it up, driven by fear of exposure rather than remorse. Throughout the trial, James attended every session, sitting stoically in the front row as prosecutors presented evidence, and witnesses recounted harrowing discoveries. Listening to the cold facts laid bare in the courtroom was excruciating, yet James felt compelled to be there, to bear witness to the truth and ensure justice was served. Lisa, however, couldn't bring herself to attend. Instead, she stayed home, surrounded by friends who held her hand and prayed silently while the verdict hung in the balance. When the jury finally delivered their decision, the courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Both Mr. and Mrs. Harper were found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to significant prison terms without the possibility of parole. Though the outcome offered some satisfaction, it didn't erase the pain or bring Marcus back. As James walked out of the courthouse that day, blinking against the bright sunlight, he felt a strange emptiness settle over him. Justice had been done, but it wasn't enough. Nothing ever would be. Back in Willow Creek, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, or at least as normal as it could be under the circumstances. Neighbors resumed their routines, though conversations often turned to reflections on the tragedy and lessons learned. Children played outside again, their laughter filling the air. But parents kept a closer watch, mindful of the dangers lurking even in familiar places. The Johnson story became a cautionary tale, passed down among families as a reminder to cherish loved ones and remain vigilant. For James, finding meaning in the aftermath of loss proved challenging but necessary. He threw himself into advocacy, work, traveling to nearby towns to speak at schools and community events about child safety. His message was simple yet powerful. Evil can hide anywhere, even behind friendly faces. Don't let your guard down. Audiences listened intently, moved by his sincerity and determination to turn personal tragedy into positive change. Many credited him with sparking important discussions about protecting children, not just in Willow Creek but beyond. Lisa, too, eventually found her own path toward healing. One afternoon, while sorting through Marcus's belongings, she stumbled upon a box of letters he had written during a school project. In them, he described his dreams of becoming an explorer, discovering hidden treasures, and making the world a better place. Inspired by his words, Lisa decided to create a foundation in his name, the Marcus Johnson Memorial Fund, dedicated to supporting programs that empower children and teach them essential life skills. From art classes to leadership camps, the fund touched countless lives, leaving a legacy far greater than anyone could have imagined. As months turned into years, the scars left by Marcus's disappearance began to fade. Though they never disappeared entirely, James and Lisa learned to navigate their new reality together, leaning on each other for strength when the weight of grief threatened to overwhelm them. They celebrated milestones differently now, lighting candles instead of blowing out birthday cakes, planting trees instead of hanging decorations. Each act was a tribute to Marcus, a way of keeping his spirit alive in their hearts. The annual memorial service held in Willow Creek's park became a cornerstone of this healing process. Hundreds gathered each year to remember Marcus, sharing stories, releasing balloons, and laying flowers at a plaque engraved with his name. It was a bittersweet occasion, filled with tears and laughter, sorrow and hope. For James, standing amidst the crowd, it was a moment of profound gratitude, not just for the love and support surrounding him, but for the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the darkest times, light could still shine through. In the end, Marcus's story transcended tragedy, becoming a beacon of hope for others facing unimaginable loss. Through his parents' tireless efforts, communities grew stronger, bonds deepened, and safeguards multiplied. People who had never met Marcus came to know him through the impact he left behind, a legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering determination to make the world safer for future generations. And so, life in Willow Creek continued, shaped forever by the boy who had vanished and the father who refused to give up searching for answers. Though the echoes of that summer afternoon lingered, they served as reminders, not of despair, but of resilience. James often found himself gazing at the big oak tree in his backyard, imagining Marcus perched high among its branches, smiling down on them all. In those moments, he allowed himself to believe that somewhere, somehow, Marcus was still watching over them, guiding them forward with the same adventurous spirit that had defined his short but extraordinary life. The years that followed Marcus Johnson's tragic death brought profound changes to Willow Creek, reshaping the town in ways no one could have predicted. What began as a quiet community defined by its simplicity and charm evolved into a place deeply committed to protecting its most vulnerable members. For James and Lisa Johnson, this transformation was both a tribute to their son and a testament to the power of resilience. Yet even as they worked tirelessly to honor Marcus's memory, the journey toward healing remained fraught with challenges, moments of doubt, and unexpected discoveries. One of the most significant developments in Willow Creek was the establishment of the Marcus Johnson Memorial Fund. Spearheaded by Lisa, the foundation quickly gained momentum, drawing support from across the region. Its mission was clear: to empower children through education, creativity, and leadership opportunities while promoting awareness about child safety. The fund launched several initiatives, including after-school programs focused on arts and science, workshops on recognizing danger signs, and scholarships for underprivileged students. Every project bore Marcus's name, ensuring his legacy lived on in the lives he touched. James played a crucial role in expanding the fund's reach beyond Willow Creek. He traveled extensively, speaking at schools, conferences, and community events, sharing Marcus's story and urging others to prioritize child protection. His speeches were raw and heartfelt, often leaving audiences in tears. "We lost my son because we didn't see the warning signs," he would say, his voice steady despite the emotion swelling within him. "But it's not too late for you to protect your own. Be vigilant, be present, and never assume someone else will do what only you can." These words resonated deeply with parents and educators alike, sparking meaningful conversations about accountability and responsibility. In many towns, James's advocacy inspired local governments to implement stricter laws regarding child welfare and neighborhood safety. Some municipalities introduced mandatory background checks for individuals working closely with children, while others invested in advanced surveillance systems to monitor public spaces. Though progress was slow, the cumulative impact of these efforts created a ripple effect, spreading far beyond the boundaries of Willow Creek. Back home, the annual memorial service dedicated to Marcus became an integral part of the community calendar. Held in the park where Marcus once played, the event drew hundreds of attendees each year. Family, friends, neighbors, and strangers united by a shared commitment to remembering him. Children released colorful balloons into the sky, each one carrying a handwritten note expressing gratitude or dreams for the future. Adults lit candles and placed flowers near the plaque engraved with Marcus's name, reflecting on the lessons his story had taught them. For James and Lisa, These gatherings offered a rare sense of peace, a chance to celebrate their son's life rather than dwell solely on his loss. Yet, amidst the collective healing, personal struggles persisted. Lisa found solace in her work, with the foundation, channeling her grief into purposeful action. But James wrestled with lingering questions that refused to fade. Despite the Harper's conviction, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were still unanswered aspects of Marcus's disappearance. Why had the Harpers acted so irrationally? Could anyone else have known what they were doing and chosen to stay silent? These doubts gnawed at him, fueling sleepless nights and haunting dreams. Determined to uncover the full truth, James revisited old evidence, poring over police reports and witness statements with renewed scrutiny. He reached out to Detective Miller, who had since retired but agreed to meet with him occasionally to discuss unresolved details. Together, they examined timelines, motives, and potential accomplices, searching for anything they might have missed. While most leads turned out to be dead ends, one particular detail caught James's attention: a neighbor named Mrs. Peterson, who lived directly across the street from the Harpers. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman known for her sharp wit and keen observation skills, had testified during the trial, but hadn't revealed much beyond confirming the Harpers' reclusive nature. However, when James visited her one evening, armed with freshly brewed coffee and a notebook, she surprised him with a revelation. "I always thought something was off about those two," she confessed, her voice low and cautious. "But I never said anything because, well, I didn't want to cause trouble." "What kind of trouble?" James asked gently, leaning forward in his chair. Mrs. Peterson hesitated before continuing. "A few weeks before Marcus disappeared, I saw Mr. Harper arguing with someone late at night. It was dark, so I couldn't make out who it was, but they sounded angry. Really angry. After that, things around here changed. The Harpers became even more secretive, and Max stopped barking altogether. I figured it wasn't my business, but now—" Her voice trailed off, heavy with regret. James thanked her for the information, his mind racing with possibilities. If someone else had been involved in Marcus's abduction, or if the Harpers had confided in another person, it could explain why they felt emboldened enough to act so recklessly. With Detective Miller's guidance, James decided to dig deeper, focusing on anyone who might have interacted with the Harpers around the time of Marcus's disappearance. His investigation led him to a man named Carl Dawson, a former handyman, who had occasionally worked for the Harpers. Carl was known for his abrasive personality and frequent run-ins with neighbors, though nothing serious enough to warrant legal action. When James tracked him down, Carl initially denied having any knowledge of the Harpers' activities. But as James pressed further, presenting pieces of evidence and inconsistencies in Carl's alibi, the man finally cracked. "I didn't know they'd hurt the kid," Carl blurted out, his face flushed with guilt. "They just told me to keep quiet about some stuff, like how they were digging holes in the yard or bringing tools into the kennel. I thought they were paranoid about burglars or something stupid like that. I swear I had no idea." Though Carl's involvement was indirect, his admission shed light on the Harpers' calculated behavior. They hadn't acted entirely alone. They had manipulated those around them to maintain their facade of normalcy. This realization hit James hard, forcing him to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil often thrives not through grand schemes but through subtle manipulation and fear. Still, knowing the full extent of the Harpers' network provided a measure of clarity, allowing James to close yet another chapter in his quest for answers. As the 5th anniversary of Marcus's passing approached, James and Lisa prepared for what promised to be the largest memorial service yet. Local businesses donated food and supplies, artists painted murals depicting Marcus's adventurous spirit, and volunteers transformed the park into a vibrant celebration of life. For the first time since his disappearance, James felt a glimmer of hope, not for himself but for the future. The changes wrought by Marcus's story had already saved countless lives, and they would continue to do so long after he and Lisa were gone. On the day of the event, the park buzzed with energy. Children laughed as they ran between booths offering face painting and storytelling sessions. Parents exchanged hugs and shared stories of how Marcus's legacy had inspired them to become better advocates for their kids. As James stood at the podium preparing to deliver his speech, he gazed out at the sea of faces before him. Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time they weren't born of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, for the love surrounding him, for the strength he had discovered within himself, and for the indelible mark Marcus had left on the world. Marcus was a bright light, James began, his voice trembling slightly. He saw wonder in everything, from the smallest bug to the tallest tree. And though his light was extinguished far too soon, it continues to shine through all of us. Today we honor him not by mourning his absence, but by embracing the joy and courage he embodied. Let's promise to carry that spirit forward, to protect our children, nurture their dreams, and ensure that no family ever has to endure what we did. The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping away tears as James stepped down from the stage. Later, as fireworks lit up the night sky in a dazzling display of colors, James wrapped his arm around Lisa and looked up at the stars. Somewhere, among them, he believed Marcus was watching, smiling down on the world he had helped transform. And in that moment, surrounded by love and hope, James allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, justice wasn't the only thing Marcus's story had achieved. It had also sparked a movement, a beacon of light guiding others toward a brighter, safer tomorrow. The 6th anniversary of Marcus Johnson's disappearance marked a turning point for Willow Creek, not just as a community, but also for James and Lisa Johnson individually. Over the years, they had transformed their grief into action, using Marcus's memory to ignite change and protect others from the tragedy that had shattered their lives. Yet, despite all their efforts, there remained an unspoken question lingering in the air. When will it feel like enough? For James, this question became increasingly difficult to answer as he navigated the delicate balance between honoring his son's legacy and finding peace within himself. By now, the Marcus Johnson Memorial Fund had grown into a regional powerhouse, funding initiatives that reached far beyond Willow Creek. Schools adopted its safety protocols, cities implemented its child protection policies, and families embraced its message of vigilance and love. The foundation hosted annual summits where experts in child psychology, law enforcement, and education gathered to discuss emerging threats and innovative solutions. These events drew national attention, with media outlets highlighting the work being done in Marcus's name. Though proud of what they had accomplished, James often found himself wondering if any amount of advocacy could truly fill the void left by his son's absence. Lisa, on the other hand, had discovered her own path to healing through creativity. Inspired by Marcus's love for storytelling, she began writing children's books filled with adventurous characters who faced challenges with courage and kindness. Her first book, titled The Boy Who Found Stars, told the story of a curious boy who climbed trees to chase shooting stars and ended up discovering the magic hidden in everyday moments. Critics praised the book for its heartfelt message and vivid illustrations, unaware that every page was infused with Lisa's longing for Marcus. Writing became her sanctuary, a place where she could reconnect with her son's playful spirit and imagine him growing older, exploring the world, and achieving his dreams. Despite their individual pursuits, James and Lisa remained deeply connected, leaning on each other during moments when the weight of loss felt unbearable. They celebrated small victories together, like seeing kids wearing t-shirts printed with Marcus's favorite quote, "Adventure is everywhere," or hearing parents thank them for making their neighborhoods safer. But there were also quiet evenings when neither of them spoke, sitting side by side on the porch swing as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. On those nights, the silence carried both comfort and sorrow, a reminder of the life they had lost and the bond they still shared. As the years passed, James began to notice subtle shifts in his perspective. While he would always carry Marcus in his heart, he realized that clinging too tightly to the past risked overshadowing the present. He started taking long walks through the woods behind their house, retracing paths Marcus once loved to explore. During these solitary journeys, he allowed himself to reflect, not just on the pain of losing his son, but also on the joy Marcus had brought into his life. Memories flooded back. The way Marcus would giggle uncontrollably while rolling down grassy hills, the determination in his eyes as he tried to teach Max tricks, the endless questions about why the sky was blue or how birds knew which direction to fly. Each recollection was bittersweet, yet somehow comforting, as though Marcus's laughter still echoed in the rustling leaves. One afternoon, during one of these walks, James stumbled upon something unexpected, a cluster of wildflowers, blooming near the edge of the forest. Their vibrant colors stood out against the muted greens and browns of the surrounding landscape, almost as if nature itself had conspired to create a living memorial. James knelt beside the flowers, running his fingers lightly over their petals. A thought struck him then. Perhaps healing wasn't about erasing the pain, but learning to let beauty grow alongside it. That evening, he returned home and suggested planting a garden dedicated to Marcus in the backyard. Together, he and Lisa spent weeks tending to the soil, choosing seeds, and nurturing new life from the ground up. By spring, the yard burst into color, a testament to resilience and renewal. Meanwhile, the town of Willow Creek continued to evolve, shaped by the lessons learned from Marcus's story. Neighborhood watch groups expanded their focus to include mental health awareness, recognizing that neglect and abuse often stemmed from untreated struggles. Local schools introduced programs designed to foster empathy among students, teaching them to look out for one another and report signs of trouble. Even businesses got involved, sponsoring workshops and donating resources to support families in need. Slowly but surely, Willow Creek became a model for other communities striving to prioritize child safety and well-being. Yet, no matter how much progress was made, there were reminders that danger still lurked in unexpected places. News reports occasionally surfaced about missing children or suspicious activities elsewhere, serving as sobering reminders of the fragility of safety. Each time, James felt a pang of anxiety, wondering if he had done enough to prevent similar tragedies. But then he reminded himself of the countless lives already touched by Marcus's legacy, the teachers trained to spot warning signs, the parents empowered to speak up, the children taught to trust their instincts. Change didn't happen overnight, but it happened steadily, one step at a time. On the 6th anniversary of Marcus's passing, the memorial service in the park took on a different tone. Instead of focusing solely on loss, the event celebrated hope, growth, and the enduring impact of one little boy's life. Children performed skits based on Marcus's adventures, musicians played songs inspired by his love for exploration, and volunteers handed out seed packets with instructions to plant Marcus gardens in their own yards. At the center of it all stood a towering oak tree, its branches adorned with colorful ribbons bearing messages of gratitude and remembrance. Beneath the tree, a plaque read, "In loving memory of Marcus Johnson, whose light continues to guide us toward a safer, kinder world." As the sun set over the horizon, casting golden light across the crowd, James delivered his final speech as the face of the Memorial Fund. His voice trembled with emotion, but his words were clear and resolute. "6 years ago, we lost someone irreplaceable," he began, pausing to steady himself. "But in losing him, we found purpose. We learned that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to create light. Marcus may be gone, but his spirit lives on. In the laughter of our children, in the strength of our communities, and in the promise we make today to never stop fighting for a better tomorrow." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the park like a chorus of voices united in gratitude. As James stepped away from the podium, he felt an unfamiliar sensation wash over him, a sense of completion, however fragile it might be. He glanced at Lisa, who smiled through tears, and then at the sea of faces before him, each one carrying a piece of Marcus's legacy forward. For the first time in years, James allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had done enough. That night, as fireworks illuminated the sky, James and Lisa sat together beneath the stars, holding hands in silence. Around them, the park buzzed with activity, but their attention was focused inward on the memories they cherished and the future they hoped to build. In the distance, a group of children laughed as they chased fireflies, their joy infectious and pure. Watching them, James felt a warmth spread through his chest, a quiet reassurance that Marcus's light hadn't dimmed. It had simply taken root in the hearts of those he left behind. In the months that followed, James and Lisa decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of the Memorial Fund, entrusting its leadership to a team of dedicated volunteers. It wasn't an easy decision, but they knew it was time to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. James returned to his work at the auto repair shop, finding solace in the rhythmic hum of engines and the camaraderie of co-workers. Lisa continued, writing, completing several more books that captured the essence of childhood wonder and resilience. Together, they rediscovered the simple pleasures of life, cooking meals together, taking weekend drives, and watching sunsets from their porch. Though the pain of losing Marcus would never fully fade, James and Lisa came to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about integrating the past into the present in a way that allowed them to move forward. They learned to celebrate Marcus's life without letting his absence define them, finding strength in the knowledge that his story had sparked meaningful change. And as they looked toward the future, they did so with hope, knowing that Marcus's legacy would continue to shine brightly, guiding others toward a world where no child ever had to disappear again.